All right, welcome everybody. This is going to be a tutorial on atmospheric perspective. So this is a reference that I had found that I'm going to use today to create an atmospheric perspective drawing. So again, I want to remind you that atmospheric perspective is all about creating depth as well as using shading to create that illusion. So I'm going to encourage you all to start by creating a value scale of 0 to 5, 0 being white, and then 5 being the darkest value possible with whatever material you are using. I'm using just a regular HB pencil, so most number 2 pencils, by the way, are in fact HB. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here, and I'm going to take a quick pause. Okay. Welcome everybody, here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and get this drawing started, and we're just going to start off with the really basic lines and shapes. Really basic here. So I'm just kind of starting with the tree line, something I can identify in the front. And I'm just starting with the trunks of that tree. So it's just going to be some straight lines that I will eventually fill in with more tree texture. Alright, so I'm going to be doing a lot of back and forth here, looking back at my photo and looking at my drawing, just to make sure that I'm maintaining some accuracy. And this may take you a little bit of time just to block everything out. Alright, now I'm going to go towards the other tree lines, the ones that kind of create those mountain-like shapes. And I'm starting off very simple. I want to make sure that these shapes are just really subtle and soft, no real detail, because atmospheric perspective, the way it works, is the closer things are, the higher the contrast, as well as the more detail you will have visible. But the further things get away from the viewer, the less detail we see and the less contrast we see. So I'm going to make sure that all of my outlines that I create here are going to be really soft. That way they can easily erase later and disappear as I build in and block in shading. Okay, so that is my generic outline. Really basic. Okay, all right. So from here, I'm going to start to build in a bit of shading, but I want to make sure that I have a paper towel. And you can use a blending stub, paper towel, or Q-tips depending on how large the surface area is. So mine's pretty big, so I'm going to use this paper towel to help soften all of my edges. I'm going to go ahead and start by adding in my trees. And I'm going to change the grip on my pencil. I want to use this crab hold like this, versus holding it like I'm writing with the pencil. We don't want our pressure to be overly hard right now. We want it to be a little softer. So by holding your pencil like a little crab, you're actually going to be using the side of the graphite, which will give you more graphite surface to shade in, as well as your pressure will be a lot softer. So you can build it up in layers and not have to worry about pressing too deeply. So here we go. So for these trees, I like to do what they kind of call a bit of a scumble, which is like a controlled scribble. So I'm not pressing too hard, I'm just kind of blocking in a very generic tree shape with these kind of scumbly marks. Really fun. This is the same technique that I will use for painting, as we kind of chisel back and forth, creating this awesome little tree. And with atmospheric perspective, it's more or less about the shading and a little less about the detail. Because it's more like you really want to capture that distance and not necessarily every single needle on the tree or every single branch that exists. Because this is pretty far away if you think about it. And if things are farther away, we're going to lose some of that detail. So I want to be mindful that I'm not getting overly fixated on different little details that you may or may not see. Just blocking them in. And this takes a little bit of time, and that's okay. You want to make sure that you are being very mindful of how much time you are spending on each of your drawing activities. Because the purpose of the activity is to teach you something. And this one's to teach you depth or space. Same thing. And I know sometimes these tutorials can get a little lengthy. I will work on some maybe software, see if I can get some editing stuff going, so we can just kind of speed through a bit of this process. But we're almost done. It's good. Like I said, everything in the front closest to us, that's going to have the most detail. But everything that goes further back, we're going to start to get lighter and more blurry. Okay. Now that I have the trees in the front, I'm going to block, again using the side of the graphite here, I'm going to block out the first layer. And notice how I'm going in one direction here. I'm not kind of scrabbling. I'm trying to keep it pretty consistent. That will make it feel very different from the trees in the front. And I am prepared fully to lose those trees, but I can always pop them back in if needed. But I'm going to start softening this edge. All right, there we go. Nice. So I may have to pop in a bit more of the tree layers, which is fine. Atmospheric perspective loves layers. It's like winter's its favorite month. It just wants to keep wearing more and more layers. That was a horrible joke. But you're getting the idea that you need to build on this. And I want you to utilize that right over here, your value scale. You really want to make sure that you are kind of counting backwards from 5. In the front should be 5, then 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So if you can use your value scale as a reference, that is the best thing you can remind yourself of. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so from front to back. All right. Next up we have our layer 3. So I'm going to press a little softer. Notice that my direction again is the same, very consistent. So if you want your values to get lighter, just press a little softer with your pencil and continue to blend. So I'm just going to get a little darker in the corner here. Some of it kind of got a little too soft, too close to a 2. So I'm going to build in a little deeper. And notice how I'm blending in like a circular motion. This really softens the edges and it blurs out any texture you may have inadvertently created. And if you still see some edges, that's okay. This is just an exercise. Okay. Maybe get a little darker with this one here. This time I went a little crisscross. I kind of went a slightly different direction. That way we can tell that it's a different layer. Kind of like a 2.5 right here. Okay. All right, so as you can tell, the lighter things get, the further off in the distance they appear. And I'm getting pretty light, so I may want to go back and darken up some of my darker values. Yeah, let's get a little darker here. And this is what I mean by a layering process. You may have to go back and forth a few times before you settle on your final outlook or your final piece. There we go. All right. Just making sure my trees stay a little bit more saturated. Adding on more layers is only going to help me. It's going to make it look more natural and more realistic. And in our terms from the rubric, it's going to make it look more readable. So we can actually tell that those are trees and not blurry blobs. All right, I'm going to go a little bit of a different direction. Still trying to stay consistent. Go. Soften. And then layer. If you really wanted, you could add on your layer 5 completely last. That way you don't have to do too much back and forth if that's something that's kind of frustrating for you. But I personally, I'm a fan of layering, and that's most likely due to the fact that I am a painter. That is something that comes naturally to me, and that is something that I enjoy. So if you don't want to have to keep going back and forth, you can always go light to dark versus dark to light. Yeah, little small tidbit there. With painting, you always go light to dark. But it's also a layering process. Much of art really is. It's all about, kind of losing yourself in the scene and getting to know your subject by really looking and not assuming. That is a mistake that many beginner artists make. They assume that they know what it looks like, and they just rush through the form and rush through the outlooks. That's why we have references, right? We always want to look back at those reference photos and see where our schemas left off. What more information did we miss? Continue to search. There's even some texture here. I'm going to gently build that in. It's just an extended tree line. But we want to blur it out so it's not as important as the trees in the front. Same back here. Little texture, but really soft. Just a little subtle indicator. Hey, there's some trees back there. Don't forget about us. Okay. Well, I hope this little tutorial and workshop was helpful for you. I'm going to continue adding in my shading and adding in layers until I'm happy. As you could tell when you first start, things don't exactly look the way they should, but the more layers you build, the better it becomes. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you.